Shalom, 我弟兄，Shalom，我姐妹，Shalom，Shalom，愿主帮助你，愿主赐你，Shalom，Shalom，再来一次，Shalom，我弟兄，Shalom，我姐妹。天上的天使也听到了他们也和我们一块唱。
It's so beautiful. Even the angels heard that. They will sing with us.
Not if. They did hear that.
Yeah, they heard.
Okay. 不好意思。
They did hear.
Let's begin with a word of prayer.
咱们祷告。
The Lord, we know that shalom comes only from you.
神知道shalom只能从你而来，平安只能从你而来。
And came particularly when you sent your son Jesus into this world.
尤其是当你把你的儿子派到了这个世界。
Shalom sometimes for him also came in the midst of difficulties.
平安也是从他而来，即使我们在困境中。
Same is true of Job.
在约伯身上发生的也是一样。
And us.
和我们一样。
Bless us therefore as we walk with Job this morning.
我们今天一起来看看约伯走过的路。
We find him moving closer and closer to you, Lord.
我们看见他越来越接近你，主啊。
We ask you to give us the shalom that he was seeking also.
在他寻找神的过程中，也能带给我们平安。
In Jesus' name, amen.
奉主耶稣基督的名祷告，阿门。
We're coming close.
我们已经快学完了。
Today we will be walking with Job in his final summation of his problems, his difficulties, and what he feels is going to be his right stance before God.
今天我们要跟约伯同行，在他最后这一段非常困难的境地，他怎样的顺服神，我们在这里能够看到他寻求神的过程。
We're going to do that primarily with chapter 23 a little bit.
我们会读一点23章。
27.
27章。
And then we are going to move to 29.
然后我们就去读29章。
His final words and 30.
然后他所说的一些最后的话，还有第30章。
And 31.
还有31章。
We'll notice as you read the book of Job that after 27, the dialogue is finished. There is nothing more the friends have to say or that Job wants to hear from the friends.
我们注意到，在27章以后，对话就完全结束了。我们再也听不到他的朋友们对他说了什么，他们之间的对话。
And we will notice also after chapter 31, there is the little note in the Bible that says, the words of Job end here.
我们也会注意到，在31章在31章的圣经中有很小的一句注释，就是说约伯说的话记在这里。
And what happens next?
那么后面接着发生什么呢？
You have to come back to find out.
你们还得回来再来找出答案。
Okay, we'll have probably at least one, maybe two, maybe 10 more sessions.
我们可能还有1到2次的学习啊，也可能是10次。
Okay, let's turn our Bibles to chapter 23.
来，把圣经翻到第23章。
And let's put on my glasses. Let's start with verses 1 to 7.
23章的1到7节。约伯回答说：“如今我的哀告还算为悖逆，我的责罚比我的哀恨还重。唯愿我能知道在哪里可以寻见神，能到他的台前，我就在他面前将我的案件陈明，满口辩白。我必知道他回答我的言语，明白他向我所说的话。他岂用大能与我争辩吗？必不这样，他必理会我。在他那里，正直人可以与他辩论，这样我必永远脱离那审判我的。”
Okay, you'll notice that he is more and more focused on seeing God, of talking with God, and of settling the problem with God.
我们在这里看到他，逐渐的越来越多的要与神一起来看清他自己的问题，然后也希望能够在神那里得到解决。
And you notice also he is becoming more and more convinced of his own righteousness.
我们也注意到他，更是越来越的能够肯定了自己的正直。
Okay, problem. One of the problems of Job, 8 in verses 8
在
to
第8节
14.
第8到14节约伯在这里有一个问题，只是我往前行，他不在那里；往后退，也不能见他。他在左边行事，我却不能看见；在右边隐藏，我也不能见他。然而他知道我所行的路，他试炼我之后，我必如精金。我脚追随他的步履，我谨守他的道，并不偏离。他嘴唇的命令，我未曾背弃。我看重他口中的言语，过于我需用的饮食。只是他心志已定，谁能使他转意呢？他心里所愿的就行出来，他向我所定的就必做成。这类的事他还有许多。
Okay. The problem is, Job, or one of the problems, is that he wants to be in the presence of God to settle the problem.
约伯的其中一个问题就是说，他希望神能够跟他同在，来解决他的问题。
And he's sure that he can stand before God and discuss the issues.
他很确定，他完全可以站在神的面前来讨论这些问题。
But God does not make himself available.
但是神却不在，
God is everywhere.
神无处不在。
And God knows everything about Job.
神知道约伯的一切事，
But is not willing to speak with Job.
但却不想与约伯对话。
And if he doesn't speak with Job, there is no solution to his problem.
如果神不愿意与他对话，那么约伯的问题就没有解决办法。
Okay, up to now, he's pretty confident when he stands before God.
他非常确信，他可以完全的站在神的面前。
But the next verses, 15 to 17,
第15到17节，所以我在他面前惊惶，我思念这事，便惧怕他。神使我丧胆，全能者使我惊惶。我的恐惧不是因为黑暗，也不是因为幽暗能蔽我的脸。
好矛盾吧？
It's contradiction with this.
Yeah. On the one hand, he wants to see God. On the other hand, he can't see God. And he doesn't really trust God. He's afraid.
很矛盾。一方面他想见到神，另一方面他又怕见到神，他很害怕。
Okay. Now we're going to skip to chapter 27.
那我们现在
Here is the shortest summary of what Job feels.
我们来看一下27节，有一个很短的总结，约伯怎么反，约伯的感觉。
We'll read 1 to 6.
1到6节，27章1到6节，约伯接着说：“神夺去我的理，全能者使我心中愁苦。我指着永生的神起誓，我的生命尚在我里面，神所自呼吸之气仍在我的鼻孔内。我的嘴绝不说匪夷之言，我的舌也不说诡诈之语。我断不以你们为是，我至死必不以自己为不正。我持定我的意，必不放松。在世的日子，我心必不责备我。愿我的仇敌如恶人一样，愿那起来攻击我的如不义之人一般。”
Okay. 我的心不责备我。
我的心不责备我。第6节。My heart won't blame me.
Right. My heart does not accuse me.
我的心不责备我。
Back in chapter 19,
在第19章，
there was that beautiful hope that Job had when he said, I know that my Redeemer lives.
约伯有一个非常美丽的见证，就是说我知道我的救赎主活着。
And we know that Redeemer, that is Jesus Christ. It's just that Jesus Christ had not come yet.
我们都知道救赎主是耶稣基督，在那个时候耶稣还没有来。
And the hope that Job had there is very different from his last statements here. I have nothing that I am guilty of. I have nothing that accuses me of any wrong.
约伯的希望在这里是不一样的，在这里他不觉得自己的有任何事做错了，他的心必不责备他。
And I'm sure that the friends, when they heard Job say this, they probably moved a little bit farther away from him, afraid that God might send lightning down to.
我想在那个时候，他的朋友听到约伯说这样的话，肯定想离他越远越好，因为他们觉得神听到的这样的话，可能要用雷来击约伯。
But we also saw that this sense of his rightness has been growing through the different discussions with the friends.
我们也注意到约伯对自己的正直这一点的信心也逐渐的增长，在他与朋友之间的对话中。
And we also said that after 27, the dialogue is finished.
我们也注意到，在27章之后，他们之间的对话就结束了。
Maybe the friends thought to talk any further it doesn't help.
朋友们可能认为继续谈下去也是无用的，没有帮助。
Maybe Job got up and walked away from the friends.
也可能约伯这时候已经站起来离开他的朋友们。
Whatever it is, the dialogue, which is the longest part of the book of Job, the dialogue is finished.
这也就是这么长的对话，在约伯书中这么长的对话，在这里就结束了。
Now, after that, there are a couple of pieces that, because of time, we're going to just skip by.
中间我们要跳过一些章节。
One of them is chapter 28.
我们来看一下第28章。
It is a beautiful poem about wisdom.
这是一个关于智慧的非常美的诗。
And I'm a little bit confused how Job can be becoming more and more fixated on his own rightness.
我不明白这里约伯
more and more emphasizing his rightness before God.
一次一次的来强调自己在神面前的正直。
And here, the whole spirit is very different.
但在这里，整个意义是完全不同的。
He talks about the genius of human beings.
他在这里讲人类中的天才。
Genius, brilliance.
Yeah. 天才。
They can go down below the surface of the ground.
他们能够钻到地底下去。
Dig deep wells.
深深的挖下去，钻下去。
And so deep that birds of the sky who fly high and therefore can see everything.
天上飞的鸟，它们飞得很高，可以看到所有的东西。
But can't follow human beings down into the earth.
但是它们不能像人类一样能够钻入地下。
That makes people think, by the way, that maybe Job was not written so terribly early, because the science and technology of digging deep
并不是太早写成的，因为那个时候科学发展已经使人类能够在地下钻井。
And his final statement and that first description of the brilliance of the human desire.
他总结的这一段就是聪明的人类所做的事情。
And he ends up saying, you can go where the birds can't see. You can go where the lions that can roam all parts of the earth, they cannot see or know. You can do that.
他说：“矿中的鹿、雉鸟不得知道，鹰眼也未见过，狂傲的野兽未曾行过，猛烈的狮子也未曾经过。人伸手凿开坚石，倾倒山根。”
But in your going down in those deep areas, do you see wisdom?
人能够钻井钻到很深，能够钻到地底下很深的地方，但是你能够看见智慧吗？
Where is the home for wisdom?
那么智慧是从哪里来的呢？
And he steps back and he talks about all of the beautiful, precious stones that can be gathered from their digging down into the earth.
他又退了一步说，任何那些贵重的、美丽的宝石。
There's kind of a list of that.
Yeah.
Can you read that?
Oh, okay.
The stones?
OK， 好。智慧非用黄金可得，也不能凭白银为它的价值。俄非金和贵重的红玛瑙，并蓝宝石不足以较量，黄金和玻璃不足以比较，金金的器皿不足以兑换，珊瑚、水晶都不足论，智慧的价值胜过珍珠。
Okay. Two things. To Two things that Job says.
在这里约伯说了2件事。
Number one, again, he says, you know where the precious stones are, and ordinary people can't get there. And that's why they're precious. But where is wisdom?
第一件事情约伯说的就是说，你知道那些宝贵的、那些珍贵的宝石都在哪里，但是一般的人他们是没有办法到达那里去拿到这些宝石。可是智慧在哪里呢？智慧从哪里来的？
His second conclusion is you can gather all of these precious stones together. I don't know how much that would cost, but you still cannot buy wisdom. The value of those stones, hyporu, the value of wisdom.
他所说的第二句话就是，即使你能够拿到所有的宝石，你也没有办法拿到智慧。你所有的宝石在一起都没有办法跟智慧相比。
I think what Job is saying is sort of a rebuke against friends who think they know wisdom.
在这里，约伯说的这段话，好像是在反驳他的一个朋友在说起他知道所有的智慧。
And also a rebuke or a statement of the frustration of Job, who's seeking for a deeper wisdom than he knows.
也是反驳另外一个朋友，就是说约伯
He is seeking for a wisdom deeper than he knows. Job.
他也是对自己的一个否定，就是说他在寻找更深的智慧。
Okay, and so the poem ends and says, well, wisdom is with God.
但是后来他最后结束呢，他说的是智慧是从神而来。
And the poem ends.
这首诗就这样结束。
It's really kind of strange because all that comes before that looks like it's not connected with this poem, and everything that follows that is not connected. It kind of stands as an orphan there.
这一篇诗好像是独立的站在那里，因为它跟前面也没有连接，跟之后的经节也没有连接。
It's beautiful.
它非常美，
It challenges us about wisdom,
挑战我们对智慧的认识，
but it doesn't provide clear answers yet.
但是它却没有给我们回答，没有提供答案。
Okay. Then after that, chapters 29, 30, and 31 is Job's final statement, a summary of all that he is feeling.
在之后的29、30、31章，这是约伯的对自己前面所有承受痛苦的一个总結，
This is not directed to the friends.
不是针对他的朋友的。
And it only at the very end is it directed to God. Otherwise, it speaks about God.
只是在最后，他是直接针对神来说，
Yeah, it speaks about God, but not to God.
就谈到了神，但不是对着神说的。
Okay. And the 3 chapters are nicely divided.
这3章很好的分别开。
First chapter, chapter 29, is kind of an expansion of what we had in the very early beginnings of chapter 1.
第29章好像就是扩出来的一章，只是来重新的叙述了在第1章最早的那几节经文。
That's before the Satan and God had their conversation and strange things.
那发生在神与 撒旦之间有一些很奇怪的对话。
That's when life was beautiful.
在那个时候，整个生命是那样的美好。
And we have to picture Job sitting on that pile of ashes, sitting on a pile of
我
garbage,
们在这
of
里来想，
ashes,
我们来想象一下约伯后来坐在那些灰上，
and his body still suffering from all kinds of illnesses.
全身长了很多的疮，
And yet, in the middle of that, he still thinks back to, oh, those good days.
尽管在这样的时候，他还是回忆起曾经那些美好的日子。
This we need to read some of this. This is beautiful.
我们要读一下29
Let's go 1 to 5, first of all.
29章1到5节。约伯又接着说：“唯愿我的景况如从前的月份，如神保守我的日子。
Oh,
那时
I'm sorry. I'll be interrupting you a few times here. Sorry. You remember? Sorry. In the English translation, the word here is that when God watched over me.
当神看顾我的时候，
You remember that one of the complaints that he had about God. Remember, he called God, you watcher of people, watcher of men.
你记得他曾经埋怨神，你就在那监视我们、监视人的。
In other words, anything that Job does, God knows about.
也就是说，约伯所做的一切事，神都知道。
Now, in the good days, God watched, and not just watched him, but watched over him to protect him.
在那些美好的日子时，神不光是在监视他，而神更是看顾他、照顾他，为他提供一切所需。
Okay, go ahead with the next
第
verse.
3节，那时他的灯照在我头上，我借着他的光行过黑暗。
Okay, do you remember chapter 3, the first time Job gave voice to his suffering?
记得第3章一开始，约伯是怎样来说他的所受的苦难。
And he prayed for darkness.
他祷告那日变为黑暗，
And in fact, he prayed for death.
他也祷告他自己是死的。
Now, Job is saying, oh, in those days with God, there was light, and I loved it, and there was no darkness to frighten me. How good.
他现在说，在那个时候，神的灯照在他的头上，没有黑暗，他在神的光中行过黑暗。
And the last verse yet,
第4节，我愿如壮年的时候，那时我在帐篷中，神待我有密友之情，全能者人与我同在，我的儿女都环绕我。
okay. Now he talks about his army.
他谈起他的孩子，
At the end of chapter 2,
在第2
one
章，
of the things that the Satan did is to remove all of his children.
在第2章结束的时候，我们看到撒旦对约伯所做的一件恶事，就是把他的孩子全部都从他手中夺去。
And he's sitting on these ashes
他就坐在
all
灰上，
alone.
他完全就是孤独的一个人坐在灰上。
But those days, they were so good. Okay, let's read 12 to 17.
29章12节，
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
因我拯救哀求的困苦人和无人帮助的孤儿，将要灭亡的为我祝福，我也是寡妇心中欢乐。想听？
All the way to 17.
我以公义为衣服，以公平为外袍和冠冕。我为瞎子的眼，瘸子的腿。我为穷乏人的腹，素不认识的人，我查明他的案件。我打破不义之人的牙床， 从他牙齿中夺了所抢的。
Okay, what is he describing here?
他在这里描述的是什么呢？
What was his life like in those good days?
他在描述在曾经那些美好的日子里，他的生活是什么样的？
What kind of person was Job?
他是一个怎样的人呢 ？Righteous。
Okay, right. A lot of different kinds of people whose life was not easy.
在很多时候，人生命中都有很多的困难，
But he cared for them.
但是约伯是很照顾他们，
He helped them.
帮助他们，
He was like a father to them.
他就像他们的父亲一样的照顾他们。
And that was part of the joy of that time of life.
在约伯的那些日子里，那是他的喜乐。
You remember that Eliphaz in chapter 22 accused him
在第22章。
of taking advantage of just exactly this kind of people.
在第22章也注意到他的一个朋友以利法就是责备他说，就是因为他做这样的事情来，say it again， 就因为这样的事情来责备他。
Right. And what his meaning was that the things that he is accusing Job of, namely taking advantage of the poor, this is something a rich person can do,
对，在以利法，
and no one will know.
以利法就是在责备约伯的时候，在22章他就提到这个，就说约伯所做的这些事情，就是为了占那些穷人的便宜。
Now, when Job thinks back to those good days, one of the things that made them good was he had a meaningful life, caring for all kinds of people with difficulties.
当约伯回想起他曾经那些美好的日子，他就会想到，他曾经是怎样的照顾那些有需要的人，有残疾的人。
Now, people look at Job and laugh at him.
而现在人们看着他，反而在嘲笑他。
Okay, and 18 through 20.
18到20节，我便说，我必死在家中，必增添我的日子多如尘沙。
He will die.
他说他要死在家中，
What kind of death?
这是一个怎样的死亡呢？
And what's the Hebrew word for pingan? Good. And number one, A. Yeah, he was living a shalomic life.
他在一个非常平安喜乐的环境中生活，
And the shalom came from him and touched everyone.
从他内心出来的喜乐也照顾到了每一个人，临到了每一个人。
And he assumed when he died, and he would die, because all things die, all living things. It would be, however, a shalomic death.
他在这里说，他也会死亡，就如所有有生命的都会死亡一样，但是他会在一个很喜乐的情况下。
In his troubles with the friends and with God, he was afraid he would die and nobody would understand who the true Job was.
他很担心，就是他的朋友、还有神、还有其他的人都不会知道真正的约伯是一个怎样的人。
But his hope then was that even in death, he would know shalom.
他的希望就是， 尽管是死亡，它也依然是有喜乐。
Okay, read the next few verses there.
第19到20。
20, yeah. 19,
我的
20.
我的根长在水边，露水中叶粘在我的枝上，我的荣耀在身上增新，我的弓在手中日强。
Okay. Two things. One is that this is a beautiful witness.
在这里注意2点，第一点就是这是一个非常美好的见证，
A beautiful statement of what shalom is for a human being.
这也是对一个人来说，平安是怎样？平安是一个什么样的解释？什么样的意义？
It's a statement, what shalom should be
平安应该是怎样的？
in a human being's life.
在人类的生命中，平安应该是怎样的？
Shalom, we'll just use the word shalom. Everybody knows it. It's such a nice word.
Okay, 我们来
Once we leave here, we hardly ever hear it.
我们离开这里可能不会再听到，在外面不会听到。
Shalom includes his life or our life with God.
Shalom 就是说我们的生活，我们的生命跟神在一起。
It includes the way we relate with human beings, and especially human beings who have needs.
也包含了所有的跟我们有关系的人们，还有那些有需要的人们。
And a shalomic life includes even death.
沙龙的生命甚至还包括死亡。
Beautiful statement.
这是一个非常美好的总结。
But I don't know if you noticed or not, every once in a while he would say, then, 那时。
我们不知道有没有注意到，过不了几节经文，他就会提到那时。
And that 那时 kind of is far away
感觉
from his 这时。
感觉那时的生活好像离他现在的这时很远很远。
Okay, but he still remembers it.
但他仍然记得。
And if he remembers, I'm sure he wishes it could come back.
他能记得，也表明他真的是希望那样的日子还能够回来。
But we move into chapter 30.
然后就到了第30章。
And we won't spend time reading a whole lot in chapter 30. Start with verse 1.
第1节，30章第1节，但如今比我年少的人讥笑我。
Sorry. 但
But
如今
but now.
And he then paints a very different picture.
我们能够看到一个非常不同的画面。
The same kind of thing that we have talked about the last few sessions.
我们在之前谈的几节中所谈到的那些事情。
So chapter 29, the beautiful days.
在29章所描述那些美好的日子，
They're not here.
但是不在这里了。
And chapter 30 is my life now.
在30章谈到是我现在的生命生活。
Verse 9.
第9节，现在这些人以
现在
我
In Hebrew, it would say 现在了。
在希伯来文中会说现在了。
Yeah. Then all of the suffering. This is what I have.
就是我身上有这么多的
And it's a contrast to those earlier days.
现在我所遭受的这么多的苦难，与我之前的那个美好的日子是一个鲜明的对照。
Okay, and verse 16 has the same beginning.
现在
现在了。
我心极其悲伤。
Okay. It's a lovely summary of the book of where the book of Job began and of the long, long road to where he is now.
这是一个对这个约伯记的一个很好的总结。从一开始，经过很长很长一段时间，到了现在，我心极其悲伤，困苦的日子将我抓住。
Okay, now his final words
他最后
in
所说的话，
chapter 31. Read 1 to 5.
第31章的1到5节，我与眼睛立约，怎能恋恋瞻望处女呢？从至上的神所得的份，从至高全能者所得之业是什么呢？岂不是祸患临到不义的，灾难临到作孽的吗？神岂不是查看我的道路，数点我的脚步吗？我若与虚谎同行，脚若追随诡诈。
Okay, most of this chapter is Job insisting that he has done nothing to deserve what has happened to him.
在这一章中，大部分时间都是约伯一再的强调和肯定，他没有做错任何事情，为什么会遭受现在这样的苦难？
And we have seen in the past sometimes when Job wishes he could be with God to talk about this.
在前面的几章中，我们也看到约伯真想与神能够面对面的讨论这件事情。
And we'll see toward the end of the chapter, Job finally is picturing himself in court.
在这一章的最后，我们注意到约伯都是想象到自己站在法庭上，
Where he and God would stand together and deal with this issue.
就是他能够看到他和神都站在法庭上来处理这件事情。
And he insists on his innocence
他一再的坚持他是无罪无辜的，
in the form of vows, oaths.
他发誓，甚至发誓说他是无罪的。
You'll see most of this chapter is if I have done such and such a problem, then I would gladly receive whatever punishment is due to me.
我们在这一章中会看到很多的句子都是说，如果我做了这样的坏事，那么我就应该是遭受这样的惩罚。
Of course, this is his last resort way of saying, I have not done that. Otherwise, I would not ask that punishment on me.
这也就是他知道他没有做错任何事情，所以他也不怕神来惩罚。
If I did not help the poor person when I should,
如果我能够帮助穷苦人，而我没有去做的时候，
if I have ever gone after someone else's wife,
如果我曾经恋慕过其他人的妻子，
if I have ever hurt any human being,
如果我曾经伤害过任何人，
and the conclusion, and this is big in the book of Job, 31, verses 35 to 37.
第31章的35到36节，
35到37.
35到37节是最好的一个总结。唯愿有一位肯听我。看哪，在这里有我所画的押，愿全能者回答我。愿那敌我者所写的状词在我这里，我必戴在肩上，又绑在头上为冠冕。我必向他述说我脚步的数目，例如君王进到他面前。
Okay. He hopes that somebody would hear him
有人在这里，
and I'm sure it's the same word that the Chinese had. I wasn't listening, didn't hear it carefully. Indictment is the legal word.
状词
Okay, a statement of crime. Okay,
就是状词，罪状。
he wishes someone would write the indictment that on the basis of which God has done these things to Job.
他希望那敌我者所写的状词就在他这里。
There's a lot of argument going on in the United States about indictment.
美国有很多
Remember, there were some FBI people who went into Trump's home to gather things that he took from the White House when the law says those things stay in the White House.
记得 FBI 的人进到川普的家里去，收集那些不该属于川普的东西，他从白宫带回家的。那么法院就说，他那些东西应该留在白宫。
Now, the FBI cannot just themselves go into someone's property.
FBI 的人不能直接就去任何人的
They
家，
first prepare an indictment,
他们首先要有案例，
submit it to a judge,
要先上交到法官那里。
and the judge is the one who says, that's good for you to do that.
法官才可以批准他们去做。
Now, we won't go into the politics, but there are some who feel we need to see what that indictment is.
我们需要知道在状词中写了什么。
Well, that's what Job was saying.
约伯说了什么呢？
Could somebody please tell me what I did?
有人能告诉我到底做错了什么吗？
I wish someone would write that, and I would, Job says, wear that as a crown.
我希望有人能够写出这样的状词来，我就把他们绑在头上作为冠冕。
Why?
为什么呢？
So people could see it.
所以人们都可以看到他的错。
And what would they see?
那么他们会说什么呢？
It's an empty document. There is nothing written on it.
这是一张空白的状词，什么都没有写上去，它没有任何的错误。
And I wear it on my body, and it would be my pride.
我可以穿在我的身上，那就是我的骄傲。
And I may be suffering. I may be suffering.
我可能仍然在受苦。
I may look ugly from my suffering.
那我也经受这些苦难，也会看起来非常的丑陋。
I may have people laughing at me because of my suffering.
也是因为我受的这些苦难，人们都来嘲笑我、取笑我。
But if I go to death, will die innocent.
但我即便是去死了，我也是无罪的。
In the meantime,
同时，
I will stand before God.
我要站在神的面前，整理好我的妆容，
As a prince.
就像一个王子一样。
Who can do that?
谁能这样做呢？
Do you have that sense that you can just walk into God's presence and insist that God accept you?
你们中间有人能够这样的站在神的面前，坚持自己是没有任何罪的，没有任何错的。
Now, just after this, it says the words of Job end here.
这一章结束的时候就说约伯的话说完了，
The dialogue is over.
对话结束了，
Job's words are over.
约伯的话也说完了。
Now what?
那么下面是什么呢？
Yeah, that's what we have to come back for.
所以我们要回来才知道，
Because obviously he's waiting for God to speak,
很显然约伯在等待神的回答，
and God does speak.
神的确也回答了他。
Probably not in ways that Job might have imagined,
可能不是约伯所想象的那样，
but it is the high point of the book of Job.
但这是这一章的重点。
Please come back, and we will begin this next week.
大家都回来听之后的故事。
All right, I know it's time for worship.
时间到了，
Let's close with singing our song.
我
Okay.
们来以这首歌来结束。
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Wacheze, Shalom, Shalom, Shen Shalom to thee, and Shalom to thee, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Wacheze, Shalom, Shalom, Yen Shalom to thee, Yen Shalom to thee, Shalom, Shalom. Good name. Good name. Shalom.